I was just looking at a book that I'd like to read for you. It's called Clyde of Africa. Now, Clyde is a little baby lion cub, about 3 months old, and he lives in Kenya. That's the eastern part of Africa. All his friends are there, too. Here's the story. Once in Africa, there lived a lion cub named Clyde. Now, Clyde kept himself busy. In fact, he kept himself very busy every day chasing balloons. He had a great time with that balloon. Give it a little nudge with his nose and hit it with his paw. Sometimes he liked playing with potatoes. He'd roll over in his back, hit it with his paw. Guess he was playing baseball with a potato. Sometimes he liked to climb up in the tree and chew on branches. And he even liked corn on the cob. Other times, he just liked to go down to the lake and watch the swans floating very quietly on the lake. But one hot summer afternoon, he was lying on a rock and feeling very, very bored with himself. And Clyde discovered something new. Now, it sort of began with a yawn, and then, well, it went from a yawn into sort of a cough. And pretty soon he stood up on his feet and he roared. I bet that really surprised Clyde because he had never roared before in his whole life. Well, he was so excited he turned around and he roared in the other direction. Well, I tell you, he was so pleased with his new discovery that he ran to tell the whole world about it. He ran down the road and jumped over a stream. And finally he stopped and came to a flower. He looked at the flower for a while, and he laughed, and he just decided that he would roar again right at that flower. And then he came upon a lake. He looked in the lake at himself and got a little closer and had a drink of water out of the lake. Then he thought again and took a big, deep breath, and he roared again. Well, pretty soon he met an old friend of his, a baboon with whom he used to play. They had a game called Pull the Tail of the Lion, and their other favorite was Bite the Tail of the Baboon. There's Clyde biting his tail. They had a great time. But this time, when the baboon said, "Hey, Clyde, come on and play," Clyde just sat up and looked at the baboon, and he roared at him. Well, this took the baboon very much by surprise, because, well, he had never heard Clyde roar before. Then Clyde walked down the road looking for bigger and better things to roar at. He hid in the long grasses and sniffed the breeze that blew across the veldt. That's what they call the big grassy plains in Africa. He lifted his head above the grasses, and he saw a wildebeest grazing on the veldt. He carefully crawled toward the wildebeest and waited for just the right moment when the wildebeest was eating a fine mouthful of veldt grass. And then he took a big, big breath and he roared. Well, the wildebeest jumped into the air and was about to run for cover when he said to himself, "Hey, that doesn't sound quite like any lion I've ever heard." And he turned around for a good look. But when he saw who had roared at him, he chased Clyde clear off the veldt and back into the tall grasses. He knew he didn't have to be afraid of little Clyde. So Clyde lay in the grasses and he thought to himself, "Boy, you've just got to be careful whom you roar at when you're not quite a lion." And as the African afternoon grew later, and Clyde was beginning to feel, well, a little lonesome, he saw a tall giraffe, which is the tallest animal in Africa and the quietest. In fact, it doesn't make a sound at all. So Clyde climbed quietly up on a rock, and when he was high enough to reach the giraffe, instead of roaring at it, what do you think he did? He kissed its nose. You know, that was a very smart thing to do because the giraffe kissed Clyde right back with a long, pink, wet tongue that felt very, very good on a hot African afternoon. And then when night came, Clyde went back to his rock. He lay down for a while and he thought about what he'd learned about roaring and about not roaring. And in his dreams that night, he went to sleep, and he roared! Hey, that's kind of a nice story. I'll bet old Clyde is still roaring at everything in sight.